You may be asking yourself, should you or do you need to be pulling on the weapon banner for her own unique weapon, the Aqua Simulacra? And while it might be the top personal DPS weapons, there's a ton of other weapons that you might want to be using instead. Now, Yelan has a lot of stats you want to put into her build so she can be utilized to her full potential. And one of the most important ones is actually energy recharge. And that's because her elemental burst, Depth Clarion Dice, is a 100% necessary thing to have access to at all times. You never want this skill to be off cooldown and not be able to use it. And while energy recharge can be a very finicky thing depending on what sort of other party members you have in your team with Yelan, what they're wearing, and what their elemental skills generate for particles, this sheet's going to help you out quite a lot. You can see that you can go as high as 277 energy recharge as a necessity to make sure you can utilize your elemental burst. However, things such as second hydro characters, weapons on other characters, as well as having someone that can battery you to the point of Raiden Shogun can decrease the amount of energy recharge necessary in your build. And this is a huge thing to factor in because the lower your energy recharge is on your build, the more HP percent substats, crit chance substats, and crit damage substats you can fit in on your artifacts. And while this isn't a build guide, it's more of a weapon guide, her best 4-piece set is going to be Emblem of Severed Fate. So knowing the amount of energy recharge you're going to need on your Yelan based on your weapon and the team that you're using her with is going to allow you to build the best one possible with this 4-piece set. And while the 4-piece set of Emblem of Severed Fate does give you elemental burst based on the amount of energy recharge you have, if you can get to 180 to 200% energy recharge in your build, it's going to allow you to have a very flexible Yelan that you can use in a lot of varying teams instead of having her hard locked to someone with Raiden Shogun only in a double Hydro team. We'll start with the first one, the Aqua Simulacra. It is her best DPS weapon for herself. However, she is a burst damage support character, so there's going to be other weapons you might want to consider. But what does this one offer? It has the 88.2% crit damage at level 90, which is fantastic. It also is going to give you damage bonus up if you're around enemies, even if Yelan's off the field, which is amazing. And this weapon really shines the lower the energy requirements are for the team party that Yelan's in. This can go all the way up to 30% more damage than any other weapon in the game at R1. But that 30% damage increase for personal damage can drop all the way down to 15% damage increase for her own personal damage due to the fact that some of these team compositions, if she needs a ton of energy recharge, might make you trade an HP percent sans for an energy recharge sans, might make you trade crit damage and crit chance in your substats for more energy recharge. So while it is an extremely powerful weapon for her own personal damage, affecting everything that she does, it really shines in teams where she doesn't need that much energy recharge in her build. Elegy for the end, though, is the opposite. Instead of it being a very strong personal DPS weapon, it's an incredibly powerful support weapon. It does give you energy recharge, which, as we stated, we're going to be on the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate, so it doesn't give as much damage as 88 crit damage would from the Aqua Simulacra. However, it does give you some energy recharge to help you on your build and converts some of that to elemental burst damage. But the thing that makes this weapon super amazing is the ability on it. Giving elemental mastery and attack percent to the other 3 party members in a Yelan team is quite substantial because Yelan most of the time is in a very heavy elemental reaction team focused party. She's there to help someone vaporize, or she's there to in a bloom team. In these super heavy elemental reaction focused teams, this weapon makes amazing because you're going to be able to buff up everyone's reactions and not just focus on Yelan's personal damage. I'd go as far to say that this is her best weapon if you're using her in a team that is heavily reaction focused, allowing you to trade energy recharge in your subsets for more crit chance and crit damage to help you balance out Yelan's personal damage in your build, while also easing the energy requirements for a Yelan build in general so you can use her in much more different teams, and also on top of that, buffing your characters that she's in the party with to do even more damage. You get the best of every world, helping you balance out her build to make her more flexible, being a fantastic support character, and allowing ease of access for which artifacts you might want to be using, making her easier to build. Out of the 5-star weapons available for Yelan, these are the top 2 that I would suggest to you. The other one that we're going to be moving on to next is none other than the Favonius warbow, which kind of looks a little lackluster if you compare it to some other options. But remember, Yelan's an HP scaler, so the loss of base attack that you would get from equipping a 4-star or 3-star weapon, she really doesn't care about. She just cares what the stat percent is that the weapon gives, as well as what the weapon ability is. So now we have 61.3% energy recharge on the Favonius warbow, but we also get the windfall effect. And having the windfall effect is going to increase the particle generation, increasing the elemental burst charge rate of Yelan herself, not to mention other party members in the Yelan team. This allows you to drop some energy recharge out of your build and your artifacts if necessary, getting more crit chance, more crit damage, more HP percent, allowing her to be more flexible, very similar to the Elegy for the end. However, on top of that though, this is a 4-star weapon, so if you don't have access to either of the other 2 bows we just talked about, this thing is the gold standard for a Yelan 4-star weapon. Which might lead you to ask, what about the Sacrificial bow? They're kind of the same. The Sacrificial bow's ability allows you to reset your elemental skill, allowing you to generate more particles by using that elemental skill again. And it would include and create hydro particles instead of the non-elemental particles of the Favonius warbow. It's pretty good, is why it's on this list, but it is slightly worse than the Favonius warbow. And this is for a couple of reasons. Namely, the Sacrificial bow does have less energy recharge on the bow stat-wise itself, only having 30.6% energy recharge instead of the 60% that the Favonius warbow has. But on top of that, when you reset your skill, you're going to have to use it again, and that takes up more on-field time. Even if it is like 1, 2, 3 seconds to get and utilize her elemental skill reset, you also have to make sure that she's the one absorbing the particles in a lot of team compositions. And so this extra on-field time with Yelan actually reduces the damage that you would gain from this bow, because you're taking up time that someone else could be on the field, driving your damage even further, whether it's a reaction team or if you just have Yelan in your party in order to buff up her damage with her Ascension talent. Another thing to talk about with the Sacrificial bow is that the refinements for this thing really matter a lot, because you only get up to that 80% chance to reset the weapon at R5. At R3, it's still only a 60% chance. So if you're looking at an R1 bow, a lot of the times you're not even going to get that reset chance when you need it, making it even less reliable when you're looking at the amount of energy recharge you need in your build. This bow could not reset your skill and leave you just shy of casting another elemental burst, and we don't want that to happen. We want to be as consistent as possible. But if you need a weapon like this and it's the only option you just started playing, go ahead, throw it on there, it'll be okay. The final energy recharge weapon we're going to be talking about in this video is going to be the Fading Twilight. Now, this was one of the free event weapons, so you should have access to this at R5 if you were there for this event. It does give 30.6 energy recharge, just like the previous bow did. But the ability for this one's going to increase Yelan's damage by a certain threshold, depending on whatever amount of stacks you have. And these stacks can stack up off the field as well. This one's pretty great if you're trying to balance your energy recharge requirements with the personal damage for Yelan, and you just don't have any other options. Maybe other characters have the Favonius weapon or the Elegy for the end, and you just can't equip it to your Yelan, and you don't want to pull for her new 5-star weapon. That's fine. This one's in your back pocket, and it's a decent option. A weapon pretty comparable to the Fading Twilight at R5 is just the 3-star weapon, the Slingshot. This weapon makes the most out of Yelan not caring about base attack. It is a 3-star, which are pretty notorious for having awful base attack, but she doesn't care because she's HP scaling. So this thing's a fantastic stat stick, giving you 31.2% crit rate, skyrocketing the amount of personal damage you can do with your Yelan. And we have yet one more weapon that you can compare to the Slingshot or the Fading Twilight at R5, and it's going to be another 3-star weapon, the Recurve bow. Now this thing's from Mondstadt chests, so maybe you've thrown them away already unless you're a new player. This thing's just going to give you a ton of health, 46.9% HP at max level, which is pretty substantial. The ability just heals you when an enemy is defeated, so it doesn't matter too much. You don't build around Yelan being a self-healer, but it's something that you can go ahead and pick up, and you'll be pretty happy with it. Also remind yourselves that 3-star weapons don't take as much Mora and as many materials as 4-star and 5-star weapons do. So if you're fairly new to Genshin, the Slingshot as well as the Recurve bow will be a lot easier and less taxing on your resources to level up and use on Yelan and give them a try. We are going to talk about a couple of weapons that are going to buff up the thing we care about Yelan the most, her elemental burst damage. We have the Moon's Moon R3 and above. It does have attack percent as the stat, which Yelan doesn't care about at all, so that's pretty useless to us. But it does increase our elemental burst damage. If you have this thing all the way up to R5, you can get up to an 80% elemental burst damage bonus, which is pretty significant. However, the amount of damage bonus you're going to get is dependent on the amount of combined energy costs of everyone's elemental bursts in your party. So this weapon can vary greatly in strength depending on who you're pairing them with. You have a bunch of characters that only cost 40 energy for their elemental bursts, this weapon's going to be significantly worse than that party in comparison to, say, a party where everyone's burst costs 70 to 80. And also remind yourselves, this is for the R5 version. If you don't have refinements for this thing, you're not coming near that R5 80% bonus in perfect circumstances. At R1, you can only get up to 40% bonus with those perfect circumstances. Now, another skill damage bonus weapon and burst damage bonus weapon is the Stringless. Now, this thing has elemental mastery on it, which may or may not be good for your Yelan build, but at R5, it is going to increase your elemental skill and elemental burst damage by 48%, which is pretty significant. But unless you're going to be using Yelan as the activator for your reactions, you're also going to be wasting that 165 elemental mastery. So while this is going to buff up the skill damage and burst damage of Yelan pretty significantly even at R5, you're trading off the energy recharge and particle generation of some of the other weapons as well. So while the big bonus personal damage weapons like the Moon or the Stringless or the Slingshot or even her own weapon, the Aqua Simulacra, look amazing on paper, they might not be that good for your Yelan, depending on where you want to use her. If the party comp you have in mind requires her to have 250% energy recharge, you're going to have to make up that energy recharge somewhere because it's not going to be on your weapon. You might have to wear an energy recharge main stat sands, you might have to trade out some crit chance and crit damage from your substat for energy recharge, and at the end of the day, you're not going to get that big 40-50% damage increase that it might look like you're going to get on the weapon itself. Yelan's a character of balance. The lower energy recharge you're going to need for her in your party, the better these personal damage weapons are going to be for your Yelan. The more energy recharge you need on the character, the better these energy recharge weapons are going to be, and the more flexible she'll be as well. Let me know what weapon you're using down below, and I'll see you in the next.